Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to another episode of New Music Finds number 37. So this is where I like to collect together all the new music that I've purchased over the past week and present it to you. And I get it from different places like my local record stores and online retail like Amazon, eBay, and more. And for this past week, I have 7 new music finds to go through with you, 4 of which are new releases and 3 of them come from my local record store and are used CD finds. So before we dive into that though, if you are new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with New Music Finds, episode number 37. So kicking things off as we always do, we start with new music releases, and these come from October 29th, this past Friday. I got 4 of them, and they all come from Amazon. So first one up was the big one, and it was the Whitesnake 25th anniversary of the Restless Heart album, box set deluxe edition version. So this was their 9th studio album when it came out, originally back in 1997, but the album itself was started out as a David Coverdale solo album, but it of course was the record label that pushed him to release it finally as a Whitesnake album. And so in Japan it comes out as a Whitesnake album, and as a compromise throughout the rest of the world it came out as David Coverdale and Whitesnake. So sort of partial Whitesnake, partial David Coverdale album in the way that it was titled there. But now, of course, 25 years later, David is turning it into a full-fledged Whitesnake album. And to do so, he has remixed and embellished it, which means he's recorded new guitar parts, keyboard parts, things like that, backup vocals to this thing to really flesh it out and give it that big, bombastic sound that we know and love from Whitesnake. So new guitar parts on this are recorded by Joel Hoekstra, which is his current guitar player, and then he's brought in Derek Sherinian on keyboards to flesh things out that way as well. And I think this new instrumentation really provides a sound that is much more in line with the classic Whitesnake sound than what this album originally came out sounding like, which in my opinion always was a bit too mellow for me in terms of what I thought should be a Whitesnake album. So now I think this thing has really kicked it up a notch and is what it wants to be. And so this thing here, really cool, 4 CDs that are in this thing and a DVD. The first disc that's in here is the 2021 remix that's been embellished. Then you've got the 2021 remaster of the original album from 1997, so you're getting that in here. Both versions you can compare, and there's different track listing on it, or track listing running order, I should say. And so you can listen to these things, but I think the way they've sequenced it now also does service to making it sound more like a Whitesnake album. And then disc 3 is called Dancing on the Titanic, and it's a bunch of early arrangement demos and things of that nature. Then the next one is called Evolutions, which are again demos, but more fully fleshed out versions of what would eventually become the album. And the last thing in here being the DVD in here, which has a bunch of music videos, some behind the scenes stuff and making of for the album and stuff like that. Great book that's in here, poster, things like that. You can see it right here on the top, poster and book and stuff like that, and it all pulls out and so forth. I've done a full unboxing of this, so I'm not going to go through the full thing here, but I will leave a link in the description if you're interested in that. And so the second thing being the same thing, but it is a standalone edition of this on CD. So this here is a single disc edition of the album, but it is the new 2021 remix of it. So while I own the original one, and you can see it there behind me, that's the 1997 Japanese edition of it. So I've got that one, the original way it sounds. This one here is now the remix, and I wanted this as a standalone edition. So it is the same track listing and everything that is the first disc that is in here, but getting it in the jewel case and having it so that I can keep it on the wall with the rest of the CDs and so forth, for me at least, is a worthwhile thing. So that's why I picked that up that way. All right, the third thing that I picked up as a new release was the brand new Doobie Brothers album called Liberte. And so this thing here is their 15th studio album first to feature all new original material in 11 years. They did have an album out in 2014 called Southbound, but it was the Doobie Brothers partnering up with a bunch of different country bands and artists and things to re-record their older hits. So this here, first new album of original material in 11 years. It's also been 50 years since their debut album came out in 1971. So big celebration all the way around by this album here. The band itself still features two original members going all the way back to 1970 when they formed. You've got Tom Johnston on guitar and vocals, and Patrick Simmons also on guitar and vocals. But they're also rounded out by longtime guitarist John McPhee, who joined the band in 1979. And also of note would be their touring keyboard player, Bill Payne, who is a founding member of the band Little Feat. So he's played with them over the years, I think going back to like 1974 or so, adding, keyboard parts on albums and things of that nature. But now he's a full-fledged touring member and been doing that for some years, and plays on this album here, does a great job. I think he definitely helps things out. But also of note is that Michael McDonald, vocalist who took over for Tom Johnston between 75 and 82, and as part of their touring lineup, at least currently, does not play on this album, which I'm okay with. I'm much more a fan of the Tom Johnston years. So this album here is Tom Johnston, Patrick Simmons taking the lead vocals on this all the way through the album, and fantastic at that. And I have to say this, I didn't have very high hopes for this album, and wasn't expecting a whole lot, but I'm really, really glad to have been proven wrong. This thing here, the 12 tracks that are on it from start to finish is excellent, just really good. It's a lot of variety on here, but the songs all seem to go together and they just flow well from one track to the next that's on here. So just an outstanding album start to finish on this, and I would highly recommend it. If you're a fan of the Doobie Brothers and you haven't really been following them for the last 10 to 20 years or maybe even longer, this album is one to get back into. Do go check this out. I do think this thing here is definitely a worthwhile addition to the collection. All right, the next one here is a big one for me, at least, as I'm a big Pink Floyd fan, as you can tell by my Nick Mason Saucer Full of Secret shirts. Pink Floyd, Momentary Lapse of Reason, the remixed and updated version of this. So this thing here, the original album itself came out in 1987, and this one here being a now remastered, but remixed and updated. So 13th studio album when it came out. It was the first without longtime member Roger Waters on it, and originally started out as a David Gilmour solo album. So that's why there's so many session musicians and things on this one. But when it became a full-fledged Pink Floyd album, when they decided to turn it into that, Nick Mason, the drummer, didn't feel like he was up to the task at the time. They hadn't been touring and playing and things of that nature. So the drums aren't actually played by Nick Mason on the album. Those were session drummers. And then due to lawsuits, and because Rick Wright, the keyboardist, had been removed from the band back in the 70s, he wasn't allowed or could not yet play on the album, and so he doesn't play either. So the album itself still is really just a David Gilmour solo album. But what they've done for this is to restore the balance between the three members. They brought Nick Mason back, and he recorded brand new drums, and they're acoustic drums, meaning they're not the electronic sounding ones from '87 that you're hearing on this. Then they went to live performances and they pulled out keyboard parts of songs that were played live in concert. Almost every one of the songs were played live on that tour at the time. So they got keyboard parts from Rick Wright, who did tour with them at that time, and they've restored keyboard parts from Rick Wright on it, new drums from Nick Mason. So the album is now truly a Pink Floyd album with all three of those members playing on it. Has a different feel to it. It doesn't have that big bombastic sound from 1987 that was clearly a 1980s mix of the album. This one here now has a much more sort of 70s vibe to it, which is kind of an interesting thing. And just of note, it was originally part of, if I get my thumb in the right place, that later years box set from Floyd Behind Me, which came out in 2019, but it is now getting the standalone edition. And you can see the original art for it there. They've updated it, adding some additional stuff. So new art, new booklet, things like that to it, and of course new sound and new performances on it. So in my opinion, not a cash grab, actually a really interesting thing to have and get by the band. So I'm enjoying it at least. All right, then I went to my local record store, Academy Records, and I found 3 used things here. Also, while I was there, I filmed an experience video of what me going through and shopping and that sort of stuff. I'm going to be posting that shortly, and you guys will be able to check that experience out if you're interested. But in the meantime, the things that I picked up from there that you will see me thumbing through in the video: Peter Gabriel Remasters Sampler from 2002, promotional only sampler, so not something you could buy in stores at the time. And it features 8 tracks pulled from 8 different albums, all remastered. And so it's got cool stuff on here like Shock the Monkey, Games Without Frontiers, Salisbury Hill, Sledgehammer, stuff like that. But it's also got some other ones from like the movie Birdie's Flight. It's got Here Comes the Flood from 16 Golden Greats. You wouldn't expect that to be on here. And then it's also got With This Love from Passion. So a lot of cool stuff on this, just a different kind of compilation and things. And always like those kind of things that you can't buy in stores, a little harder to come by, so I picked that up. And then this was a cool one here. I picked this up on a whim. The Tubes Best of the Tubes 1992 compilation featuring 14 tracks on it. And so this spans the Capitol Records years of albums that was throughout the 80s and features their biggest hit, She's a Beauty. Now when I bought this, I didn't recognize that song title or know that I knew that song. So I put this on. It's the first track on here, and I come to realize that I know a Tube song. Now previously I've got one that's called Tube Hits and Rarities or something like that. Release, I think it was called Trash, and it stood for Tube Rarities and Hits and something else. But I've got that one, which had White Punks on Dope. I knew that because Motley Crue had done a cover of it. And I knew a few of those things kind of like that. But the earlier stuff has much more variety and is very different than what they did in the 80s. So I never really explored them much beyond that. I'm really, really glad I picked this up. This whole release from start to finish is very good. Just a nice collection from a specific period. So it's a very solid listen all the way through. I think I'm going to explore some of the other albums from the 80s by them. All right, and then here's another one that I picked up, and this one just fleshing out my catalog. Nirvana Incesticide, 1992, third release by them. It was the follow-up to Nevermind, which came out in 1991, and just, I think on that strength alone, this one here ended up selling 1 million copies. But it's a compilation that features 15 tracks, and it's got things that are non-album singles, B-sides, demos, outtakes, cover songs, stuff like that on it. At the time when I picked it up, just because it was the next thing coming out by Nirvana, I really, really enjoyed it. I have to say I still do. Somewhere through the years I got rid of the thing, but putting it on, it's like, sort of returning to a long lost friend. It was like I knew every track on here. I knew every little nuance of the album itself. Don't know why I got rid of it when I did, just thought I probably had outgrown it or whatever, but as I've gotten older, I want to add those things back to the collection, so this one is coming back in. I've got the other albums, I picked them up as deluxe editions, but this one here, they've never released it as a deluxe edition. Don't know if they ever will, so at least I'm picking it back up on a standalone release. And so there you go, that is New Music Finds number 37, 6 CDs and 1 box set for you, 7 total New Music Finds. And certainly check the description for links to related videos, in particular that full review of Restless Heart by Whitesnake. Also, I did a full review of the Doobie Brothers Liberte, so that will be linked in there. And I've done a full review of the Pink Floyd Later Years box set, which of course contains Momentary Lapse of Reason, and I talk about that there, so you can check all 3 of those out if you're interested. And certainly if you've enjoyed this video, please consider sharing it out on social media. All right, everyone, take care, have a great day, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.